Nelson. We'd been poring over derivatives for more than 2 hours already, and my neck was tired of being turned sideways, crooked, and upside down to check Shaquanda's calculations without having it seem like I was trying to crawl into her lap at the same time. Oddly, she didn't seem to need all that much help. She was a little unclear about logarithmic functions, but she understood my explanations right away. Mr. Armbruster had given me some practice sheets, and Shaquanda made me do them too. I swear she was trying to finish hers before I did. We were sitting at a long table in a room full of long tables. There were windows at one end of the room, but we were so far away from them that, after sitting so quietly for so long not talking about anything but numbers, you could actually start to believe there was no outside. No sun, no breeze, no traffic, no noise. I'd always liked that about libraries, the way you felt surrounded by the huge warm silence. But being with Shaquanda made me restless. At the very least, I needed to move and speak and look at her face. Finally, at about 1 o'clock, when we'd gotten through all the sheets, I called a halt. "I'm starving. Let's go get some lunch." "I brought a sandwich," she said, not looking at me, "to save time." "Please, Shaquanda, nobody can do calculus for more than 2 hours without a break. There's a great Thai place right across the street where my dad always eats." She looked uncertain. "Thai? Like from Thailand?" "Yeah, you know, pad Thai, noodles and peanuts and bean sprouts." I'm not dim. I know she lives in Spalding and doesn't have piles of money and might not ever have eaten in a Thai restaurant before, but I didn't think I should act like I thought that. She gave me a long look, almost a dare of some kind. "Well, I'm not a big bean sprout fan, but if you're buying—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Of course I'm buying. I invited you," I said. Really, the whole thing was kind of ridiculous. I was getting paid a measly $7 an hour to tutor someone who didn't even seem to need tutoring, and now I was going to spend my earnings taking her to lunch. Not that I minded. I would have paid to tutor Shaquanda Nichols. I'd been looking forward to it all week. I'll admit that until this year, I never paid much attention to Shaquanda, even though she's been in many of my classes the past 4 years. You might think we'd have been friends right along, since she was one of the only other African Americans taking honors classes. Since there are only a handful of black families living in Scrub Harbor, there aren't more than a few of us at the high school at any one time. There was a girl a few years ahead of me doing honors. Our parents were kind of friendly, but I never knew her that well. In my freshman year, there was another USISS guy from Spalding who was doing honors math and science, Lou Hilliard. Actually, I did get to know Lou a little bit. I liked him. He was kind of a hotshot kid, always showing off in class, which plenty of the white kids did too, especially freshman year, when a lot of people are in a hurry to make a big impression. Lou came over to my house a few times. He said he wanted to be a doctor, and my mother spent one entire afternoon telling him all about medical school. Then he didn't come back to Scrub Harbor sophomore year. I guess he just went to school in Spalding. I never heard from him again. Anyway, it didn't seem like I had much in common with Shaquanda. We were always friendly, but never friends. Maybe because the thing with Lou didn't work out. I guess I thought, why get involved with the Spalding kids? They aren't really like you anyway. That sounds awful, I know, but it's true. Most of them have this tough act going, where they pretend they can't even see anybody else except the other kids in the program, and a few white kids who hang around wearing hip-hop clothes and worshiping them. Most of them have a swagger I could never master and a lingo I could barely understand, and they don't seem that anxious to talk to me either. But for some reason, this year Shaquanda seems different. Now that everybody's talking about where they're applying to college, I'm thinking about the future. Suddenly I realize we're not all going to be spending the rest of our lives in Scrub Harbor, especially the honors kids. Next year we'll be in schools all over the place, and it won't matter whether we grew up in Scrub Harbor or Spalding or New York City. I'm sure Shaquanda will be going to college too, which makes her seem more like me than unlike me. And besides, she gets better looking every year. She has the most beautiful black skin I've ever seen, and it's stretched over just the right amount of everything underneath. It stopped raining by the time we came out of the BPL, which made me feel a little less guilty for running out on Nadia. I was hoping she managed to speak to that Adam guy. It wouldn't hurt her to make a new friend. It wouldn't hurt me either. Don't get me wrong, Nadia is a nice girl, but she depends on me too much. We're seniors. Next year she'll have to figure out how to make friends on her own. I do feel a little mean, like I'm pushing her out of the nest, but it's for her own good. We got a window seat at the restaurant, and the waiter brought menus. Shaquanda looked a little puzzled as she read hers over, and I wondered if I should have gone with less exotic food. "Would you like me to order for you?" I asked. I don't know what made me think of that option. Some old movie, maybe. She looked astounded at my offer, which was obviously ridiculous. "The menu is in English, Nelson. I can read." "I know you can read. I just meant—" God only knew what I'd meant. But then her face lit up. "They have curry. I love curry. My uncle makes the best. That's from Thailand?" I nodded, eager to reclaim my authority. I think it was an Indian food originally, but a number of cultures do curry dishes. Each of them does a different adaptation of it, of course. A Thai curry, for example, will be made with coconut milk, whereas an Indian curry is more likely to use a meat stock. Shaquanda tried to stifle her grin. "Really? I'll try to remember that," she said. I blushed. I'm not usually this much of an asshole. I didn't think. I decided it was finally being able to sit across from Shaquanda and watch her slowly blinking eyes search the menu that had so stupidly loosened my tongue. She ordered the Masaman curry with chicken, and I ordered a yellow vegetarian curry. And even that seemed dumb. Why didn't I order it with beef, which I like better anyway? As though the person I was pretending to be wouldn't eat meat or something. Now that I was done teaching her math, I felt off balance, like no decision I made would be right. I'm not usually such a goofus around girls. I dated Christine for a few months last year, and another girl the year before that, and they both still like me, even though we broke up. And of course, Nadia is my shadow. I'm used to girls, which made it all the more confusing that I'd become a dumbbell in the time it took to cross Boylston Street. I decided to try to put things right with a compliment. "You know, you have a good understanding of calculus. I'm surprised you're not doing well in Armbruster's class." "Oh, I'm doing all right. I just want to do better," she said. "What's your average in there?" She pursed her lips and thought back over the term. "I should have a B+ going." "B+? Here I thought you were scraping by or something. B+ in honors calculus is good." I tried to think back over our lesson. Had I been very condescending about my abilities in math? "I know it's good," she said. "Well, why did you ask for a tutor then?" A thought crossed my mind. Somehow she'd known I would be the tutor. This was all a ruse to spend time with me. Ha! "I asked for a tutor because B+ is good. Are you getting a B+ in there?" "I've got an A, I guess." Why should I feel embarrassed about that? "No kidding. And would you be satisfied if you had a B+? Talking to her was like dodging snowballs. You never knew where the next one was coming from, and sooner or later you knew you were bound to get hit. "My father wouldn't be satisfied," I said, giving a little laugh. "Well, my mother isn't satisfied either, and neither am I. And neither would you be, you liar." She didn't say it in a mean way. In fact, she said it jokingly, but it hit me anyway, right in the face. I guess she could tell I was a little stunned. She waited until the waiter had put our lunch in front of us and refilled the water glasses. Then she said, "I guess that's why I asked for you to tutor me. I wouldn't be comfortable ragging on a white boy like that." "You asked for me?" I tried to take a little comfort from it. "Of course I did. It's not so bad that you think you're smarter than me, though you're not. But I really can't take that attitude from white kids. Like they're going to reach way down and do me a favor." I was speechless. So much information to take in. She chose me, but she was smarter than me. How did she figure that? She thought the white kids looked down on her, but I didn't. Which, if any of that was true, seemed impossible to figure out. "I like the curry," she said, "but it isn't nearly as hot as my uncle makes it. His is fiery." She looked up. I know, every culture makes it differently. I decided to go for a slight change of topic. "What schools are you applying to?" She shrugged. "UMass, Boston University, maybe Suffolk." "Really? What's your class rank?" She sighed. 9th. I didn't have a great attitude my freshman year, and it's kept me down a little. I could swing up to 8th by the end of the year, though, especially if I get an A in calculus. "That's terrific." "Not as good as you, number 2. I was flattered that she knew. "And likely to remain so, since Sarah Tolliver has a lock on valedictorian." "So are your SATs exemplary too?" "They're good enough. I know what you're going to say. I should be applying to Ivy League schools or something." "Well, you could. Why not, if your stats are this good?" She shook her head. "No thanks. I have to stay around Boston. My mother has 3 kids at home, and I help her out." Besides, why should I pay to be stuck in one of those little dorm cells with somebody I hate? You could at least apply to Harvard. That's close enough to commute. Even as I said it, I thought of the application I had mailed off last week in order to be eligible for an early decision. If it was up to my father, that application would leap to the top of the pile and demand an acceptance letter. She read my mind. How many of us would they take from one small school? I mean, you're on track for Harvard, aren't you? How do you know that? I make it my business to know things. She subdivided the last of the curry on her plate so that each bite of chicken had a little pillow of rice around it. Even if I get into Harvard, that doesn't mean you wouldn't. She shrugged. Harvard's not for me. I walked around there once, sat on the steps of that big library. It didn't feel right. It's not who I am, you know? I nodded, although I didn't have a clue who she thought she was, or who she thought I was, or who Harvard thought either of us might be. I called the waiter back over to order some tea. Shaquanda got up to call her mother to let her know when she'd be home. I guess we're done with tutoring for today? I can't imagine what else I can show you. You just don't want me getting that A+ before you do, she said, and then walked slowly down the aisle to the back of the restaurant. I was not the only male in there who watched. I liked this girl, even more than I expected to. I liked the way I never knew what she'd say next, even when it made me feel stupid. It was thrilling. But I had the distinct feeling I'd been lumped into the same category as Harvard. We weren't for her. By the time she got back, the tea was cooling off already. She must have called every relative in the phone book. Everything all right? My mother gets upset when my older brother Darius doesn't get home on time, or call. I had to call around and locate him. Couldn't your mother have done that? Her lip curled to one side. I have certain phone numbers that she doesn't. You know how it is. You don't want your mother knowing everything. So how come you didn't call her? This time her lips parted slowly and she laughed. You are such a good boy, aren't you, Nelson? I'll bet your mother has never lost a moment's sleep over you. I could feel my ears heat up. Well, why would she? What's the point of worrying people who love you? Her more sophisticated than thou attitude was starting to annoy me. Her smile slowly collapsed inward. No point at all. She sat there wrapping the string of the tea bag tighter and tighter around the spoon, as though she were trying to cut off its circulation. I watched her for a full minute, mesmerized. Find another topic. Do you remember a guy named Lou Hilliard? He was in USISS our freshman year. I'd been thinking about old Lou today anyway. She looked up sharply, as though the question had startled her. Sure, I know Lou. I went all through elementary school with him. Yeah? Whatever happened to him? Why didn't he come back to Scrub Harbor? She picked up her cup and stared into it like she was reading tea leaves. He hated the damn bus ride. The bus ride? She nodded. It is awful. You get up at 5:30 so you can leave Spalding by 6:45, and then you sit in that crowded, drafty bus that stops in 3 other towns and heats up to 120 degrees before it lets you off in Scrub Harbor. We all hate it, but Lou just couldn't stand it. He even hated getting off the bus while all the Scrub Harbor kids were getting dropped off by their mothers in minivans and big old Volvo station wagons. I guess he just hated everything about it. Man, I never realized that. You knew him real well. Her sly smile seemed to be laughing at me again. No, not real well, but I knew him. He never told me that. He wouldn't tell you, Nelson. You'd have to be on the bus to know it. I let that pass. So he goes to Spalding High School now. She shook her head and sipped her tea. He's in jail, last I heard. What? Why is he in jail? She sighed and looked out the window. He didn't kill anybody. I don't know, some drug deal, I think. I forget exactly. You don't remember why he's in jail? When she turned to face me again, anger was sparkling in her eyes. You expect me to remember the rap sheet on every juvenile delinquent in Spalding? I know, you talked to him twice and you thought he was a real prince, but Lou Hilliard was never a guy who was going to make it. He let everything get to him. I could have told you that back then. I picked up my cup of tea, but instead of drinking it, I just stared down into it and let the steam warm my cheeks. I'm not as big a jerk as you think I am, I said. I don't think you're a jerk, she sighed again, a heavy sigh. You don't know a damn thing about being black, but I don't hold that against you. You were lucky to be raised in a place you don't have to know. Well, that's bullshit. As a rule, I don't like to swear, but I didn't even think about it this time. It was the only word that seemed to apply. A woman at the nearest table turned halfway around to look at me. Is it? All your friends are white. Don't you just forget sometimes that you aren't white too? Not for a minute, and that's why I don't forget it. Because no matter how many A's I get or how many clubs I'm president of, I can't make there be no difference between us. They're my friends, but I'm their black friend. Even as I said it, I knew two things. That it wasn't true for everybody, probably not Nadia or Christine, and that it was so true for most people it made me feel sick. Shaquanda was quiet while I got my wallet out and paid the bill, leaving a hefty tip since we'd been sitting there so long and talking so loudly. I imagined Shaquanda was counting up the cash on the table and thinking, "You're such a good black boy, Nelson." I followed her outside. The afternoon had gotten windy and we zipped up our jackets. "What subway did you take? I'll walk you." "You don't have to." "I realize that. What subway did you take?" I knew I sounded angry, but I couldn't help it. "Green Line, just down the block." I nodded. "I get on there too. Going the other way, of course." "I'm sorry I pissed you off back there. I say what I think, Nelson. Sometimes people don't like that. Would you go out with me?" I said, interrupting her. What was there to lose now? She stopped walking and looked at me. "Where? You mean like a date or something?" "What else would I mean?" "I don't think I've ever been asked out that way before. Like, so formally." I groaned. I would never do anything the right way with this girl. "Let me ask you this," she continued. "Have you ever dated a black girl before? I know you've had white girlfriends." "What was my choice? I hardly knew any black girls." "You knew me. Let's just say you were a little intimidating." She liked that, I could tell. "So you liked dating white girls? They weren't so scary?" "I liked the girls I dated, yes, but it didn't make me feel white, if that's your next question. It made me feel exposed, different, black." She looked at me through half-closed eyes as though the truth could not be disguised if you saw it out of focus. I was about to tell her to just forget the whole thing when she said, "You realize I asked for you to tutor me even though I knew you didn't need the money. I knew if you agreed it would be for some other reason." I stared at her. "What other reason would that be?" "God, Nelson, don't be so dense," she said. "I know you like me." "You do. You know that." I felt like I was sliding down the side of a large building and there was no place to grab on. "So where would we go on a date?" I couldn't imagine. Getting through another 5 minutes with her seemed impossible. How could we go on a date? "Well, most people do. I don't know. Go to a movie." She didn't say anything while we sprinted across the street through traffic to the subway station. I could see this guy standing there from 10 feet away and I made a quick decision, the way you always do. I didn't know what Shaquanda thought you ought to do when you saw a young black guy shaking a paper cup at the subway entrance, rattling a few coins and asking for more. I couldn't even imagine. So I decided to do what I usually do, what my father does. I reached into my pocket and brought out a handful of change, quarters, nickels, dimes, and tossed the whole batch into the cup. It made too much noise and I was immediately embarrassed, as I always am in that situation. "Thank you, kind sir," the man said jovially, then noticed my companion. "Hey there, girl. What's my Shaquanda doing roaming around with this rich boy?" "Hey, Jerome, what's happening with you?" I stared at her. I couldn't help it. Not that I hadn't heard the other USISS students speak like this to one another. I had, plenty of times, but never Shaquanda. She spoke the way all the honor students spoke. "You tell Darius he better get his ass up to see me one of these days," Jerome said. "I will," Shaquanda waved to him as she ran on down the stairs and around the corner. I hurried to catch up, but for some reason she seemed able to swim right through the oncoming crowd that knocked me around like a tidal wave. I rounded the corner and saw that she'd stopped at the spot where we'd have to part ways. Her to go south, me north. "He's a friend of my brother's," she said, though I hadn't asked. "He's not a bad guy, just can't hold a job." "Yeah, he seemed nice." What was I supposed to say? I asked you. I gave the guy some change. How was I supposed to know the ramifications of my small generosity? She gave this really nasty laugh. "Yeah, he sure seems that way, doesn't he? He shakes that cup the way a nice person would." "Listen, Nelson, I thought maybe I could go out with you, but I can see now that's just not going to work out." My head felt like one of those microwave popcorn bags when it gets real big and hot enough to explode. "Why not? Because I can afford to throw away some change? Because I didn't have a big conversation with your buddy Jerome? Because you're embarrassed to be seen with somebody who's not black enough? Or because I'd be a more acceptable black person if I didn't have money? Which is it? I think I should at least know my crime." She locked her jaw and stared me right in the face. "You're not a bad guy, Nelson, but I can't go out with somebody who feels sorry for me." "What?" I tried to protest, but she kept on talking. "Maybe you can't help it, but you do. The way you talk to me and smile at me, the way you looked at Jerome, She put her hand on my arm for just a second, then let go. Tell you what, sometime after we both grow up and finish college, start living our real lives, you call me up and we'll go to the movies. You think I'll be blacker by then? I felt like there was sand in my mouth, wet sand, that I could neither spit out nor swallow. I think we'll be who we are by then, she said. A train whistle blew like a shrill wind through the station as she disappeared down the tunnel.